And they said, okay, well, we're just go in there and put a stent in. And so I was in the hospital overnight because they were worried about some things. And when the on-call cardiologist was checking me out of the hospital, he asked me, how do you live your life? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, two reasons really is we're surprised that you walked in here for a scheduled appointment. Secondly, we're surprised that you walked in here at all.
Oh, wow.
Lube your chain and pump up those tires. It's time for Aging on Dirt, where we defy expectations one pedal stroke at a time. We age, but we don't have to get old, and we all want to experience the joy of mountain biking as long as possible. Are you starting to ride at an unreasonable age, getting back into it after a long layoff, or just wanting to extend how long you'll be riding? Then you're in the right place. And now, your host, Joel Zeeve.
You're about to listen in on a very memorable conversation I had with Scott Quinney, simply referred to by Q by his friends, and often Scotty by me, as that's who he was years ago when I first met him. Q has had plenty of opportunities to have reasons, well, honestly, excuses, not to ride. He'll share most of these with you, from issues with his parents and his in-laws to his longtime health challenges. But instead of using these as excuses to let his health continue to deteriorate, he's used them as motivation to get in better condition and increase his lifespan and health span. So if you're not sure if you've met Q on the trail, if you've ever seen his very bright colored kits, bikes, helmets, and more, he's pretty easy to spot and not very easy to forget. He's one of the friendliest mountain bikers that I know, always willing to chat, always encouraging you, regardless of your riding ability. Take a few minutes to learn some important health and life lessons from a guy who's still dealing with health issues every day, one day at a time, by applying his simple daily philosophy of win the day. Enjoy. Let's welcome Scott Quinney. How are you today, Scotty?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for joining me today. So Q, so that everybody can quickly get to know you at a high level, please let us know where you're from, how old you are, and your favorite mountain bike trail that's relatively close to home.
As far as where I come from, I've been in Layton for 1994.
Okay.
I was raised in California. Even though I moved to Bishop, California when I was about 12 years old, I call Bishop, California my hometown, and then lived in San Diego 6 years of my married life, and then I've been here since in Utah. July 25th, I'll be 60 years old.
Good for you. Happy 60th. And your
freaking decades.
Entering your 7th, if that's not a scary thought. And your favorite trail close to home?
What's your definition of close to home?
Whatever yours is.
Well, my favorite place to ride is actually North Fork.
Okay.
My closest to home is Layton BST and East Wilderness Park.
Okay. Yep. Those are great spots.
I can actually ride. I can ride there from my house, actually.
Okay. That's tough to beat. That's for sure. Okay. Cool. So I guess let's start off. I'll just let you dive into this however you want. You and I have kind of been talking about having you on the show for a while. We've had different doctors and physical therapists on and talking about health and things like that, but you've actually gone through it. You've had some pretty serious health issues throughout your life. Why don't you start off just by sharing for how long you've had them, how they started?
My most serious stuff was I'm up to 5 heart surgeries and countless different testings, which turned out to be genetic. When I had my first heart surgery, it was one stent. My right artery was actually 95% blocked.
Oh, geez.
And
so how long ago was that first one?
That was actually October 31st, 2008. And kind of how it all came about is, Sean, as you remember, 2008 was a horrible year for economy.
Oh, sure.
And when it tanked. But even prior to that tanking, my father at age 65 dropped dead of a heart attack in March.
Oh, wow.
In June 6, 2008, which we just passed there, right? I had to pull the plug on my mother.
Mm.
And then the market tanked, and I probably lost $5 million overnight in equity of all my investment properties.
Wow.
And so
you had a lot of stress going on here.
Yeah, so 2008 literally broke my heart.
Right, literally.
Literally. I went to the University of Utah Hospital and did some testing. I was involved in testing for the correlation between reflux and exercise-induced asthma.
Hmm.
And in the second stage of that, there was a treadmill test that I had to stand a treadmill at what they call steady state, where I have to keep up the pace for a half hour and maintain that same pace. So I don't remember what it was, truthfully, but let's just call it 2 miles an hour. I had to maintain that for 30 minutes. I was doing this testing, and about 15 minutes into this treadmill test, I started having severe chest pain. So they had me sit down, and then they called the doctor in charge of the study. So I had to go for testing, and then we did an angiogram, and now they tell my right artery 95% blocked. So when they were checking me out.
So it's a good thing this happened when you were at the hospital on the treadmill then.
Well, it's a good thing that they caught it. And they said, okay, well, we're just going there and put a stent in. And so I was in the hospital overnight because they were worried about some things. And when the on-call cardiologist was checking me out of the hospital, he asked me, how do you live your life? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, 2 reasons really is we're surprised that you walked in here for a scheduled appointment. Secondly, we're surprised that you walked in here at all.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, that's why I'm so mad. Because I was actually quite livid that I had to have heart surgery. It's like, because I've been on a health journey prior to that. And I said, I eat right. And for the most part, right? We all have those days,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I exercise, And he goes, in your case, it's 70% genetics, 15% exercise, and 15% diet.
Wow.
So I said to him, so I can still have my chicken wings?
Okay.
And he said yes. I said, okay, all right.
And
Life goes on.
And your tacos?
Back, I've always liked tacos, but back then, nachos and chicken wing were my like Friday night dinner. It's like I call it my off-plan eating. And so I checked out of the hospital, and Joe, I felt so good. I did not know I felt that bad prior to that first heart surgery.
Okay, I guess it was kind of a gradual downhill kind of a thing where you don't really notice it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I always got tired, and I had stopped snowmobiling because it just wore me out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd go to Bear Lake and go in the water, and then like one time they had to pull me out of the water because I didn't have the strength to get in. So what I now know is, with my artery 95% blocked, any cold was making my artery shrink up or constrict, and that was causing my problems.
Okay.
So lack of blood flow just makes you tired,
Sure.
And then about February, I had another stress test to check things out, and I had to do a treadmill test then too, and I stuck up the treadmill feeling like crap again. And the next day they called me back and said, hey, looks like you got some more problems. So they went back in, found out my original stent was plugged up, and put 3 more in and fixed that one. Come November 2009, so we're almost a year out of my first one, I started having the same symptoms as before everything. And this time they went in there and found now that I had another blockage right above that branch. It's actually called the Widowmaker.
Yep,
and
I've heard of that.
So then they said, hey, you need a can you appreciate this? So you need an open heart surgery. And I said, you fools have been trying to sell me a bypass for a year now. I'm not buying it. And then finally I had to meet with the specialist with my wife, and after a couple hour discussion of me fighting it, I just had this overwhelming feeling of peace that I needed to do that.
Okay.
And so I did. And then as far as everything went fine, I had to go to the ER a couple of times over the years with chest pains, but they never found anything. I finally tied it in myself that when I had those chest pains, it was a matter of I was dehydrated. Yeah, so point number one in any activity in any life, hydration is number one key.
Mm-hmm.
If you know, so many people, you know, I see them riding, and they don't even have any water with them. And so that kind of brought that my open heart surgery, quadruple bypass, brought me back into biking, I should say. I grew up biking and BMXing and riding my bike to school and all over town.
Where did biking come into this? So it was basically after that third surgery, the big one. And you felt good enough where you knew that you could jump on a bike and ride and enjoy it and not get exhausted all the time.
Yeah, that's simplified. I was born 6 weeks early.
Mm-hmm.
And through all of this process, years obviously, but I found that my arteries are too small going into my heart, so that gave me complications under stress.
Okay, so this is unrelated to the genetic issues, or
well, that is part of the genetic issues.
Okay,
like today, I still have some issues with cardio endurance because my heart cannot beat as much as it needs to, especially when I'm climbing up on the bikes. Along with being born 6 weeks early, I've always had a little bit of lung issues. So now you take my heart issues and my lung issues, and it led to what I call is not optimal performance.
Right.
I can only go so much, but I've just learned to diet, nutrition, hydration, like I said, is key. When I started riding my bike, my first bike was actually a 3-speed beach cruiser.
Okay.
And then in my old neighborhood, I lived by a little Caves Creek Trail there in Layton, if you know it.
Yeah,
and
that's fun.
From my porch up to the top and around Hobbs Pond and back was actually 4 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And it has some pretty steep climbs. So the first time I climbed that whole hill on my 3-speed beach cruiser without stopping was a happy day.
I bet it was.
Yeah. So I'd walk it, I'd ride it, and then I started riding the cruiser around, and I took it from Farmington Station down to Rose Park. It's about 25 miles if I remember right.
Okay.
I decided then I needed to get gears. I needed a lot of gears.
You mean like more than 3?
Yeah. And then kind of when I first started riding, I said, you know, I'm gonna be the fittest guy I can be. I'm gonna train for a triathlon.
Good for you.
Well, it didn't last very long because I don't like swimming. I don't like lap swimming. I don't like to go back and forth in a pool. I even took lessons, and I detest running at all cost. And I took lessons to how to run, but I think it's my cardio and all my stuff. It just took me so long to get in the zone. And plus, running just hurt my knees and my back. And I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to stick to biking.
Okay.
And now I'm probably on, I don't know how many bikes I've had now. But that kind of leads me into the whole issue of e-bikes, right?
Well, before e-bikes, though, what did you get for your first mountain bike, and when was that?
Maybe 2011.
Okay.
It was one of my first mountain bike. It was a 26-inch Scott.
Okay.
And people said, "Oh yeah, you have your name on it." I said, "Yeah, that's if when I pass out and I hit my head. I know what my name is."
Right.
You know, it was like $300. I bought my wife one too, so we'd go right around on the paved trails around here and gravel trails. Didn't really do really good in the mountain bike, you know. But when I was buying it down at Biker's Edge, he was telling me that this other bike was like $850, and it was 9 pounds lighter.
Mm.
I'm going, you know what? What's 9 pounds? It's like, I didn't know any better, you know? And I never even trying to explain it to me that 9 pounds on a bike is a lot. But I said, well, I could probably afford that $900 bike. Let's just call it 900. But then I can't buy my wife one, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ride with me. My first, what I call my first real bike was a giant Defying road bike.
Okay.
And so I could go from my house and just ride on the trails and keep my heart rate down. And then I moved in. Then I eventually got I think it was a Spark 980, full suspension mountain bike, and that kind of changed my world.
So
So
is that the first one that really got you on the single track up in the mountains?
correct,
Okay.
correct. Because going up the hill on that first Scott at 9 pounds, you might as well have been 990 or 900.
Sure.
And and then after a while, I went down to the bike. You know what? I need a dropper post. I want to go do a one by gear drive
Mm-hmm.
and then Zach down there at Bikers End said, hey Q, it'd be better if we just get you into a different bike. I mean, but because by the time I put all this money into it, and that bike's not really set up for you, then the kind of riding you do.
Okay.
So that's when I got my little bright yellow Cannondale Lefty,
Okay.
which I rode with you, and
Yeah. So that Lefty was really your first quote unquote real mountain bike with the one by drivetrain and really built
correct,
for you and single track.
yeah, 27 and a half tire plus size tires. So then my next bike was a Obrea Rise e-bike,
Okay. Right.
and
So
because as
what made you want to make the shift to the e-bike? I mean, what was going on health wise where you said that the mountain bike isn't cutting it, or
yeah, so if you go back a minute when I talked about my arteries going to my heart are not as big as it should be, with my little lung issues, and you rode with me back in that time, right? I'd be climbing uphill, and some days I'd be okay, some days not so okay. Some days my legs would just crap out because I learned a lot since then that I just wasn't getting oxygen. I wasn't getting oxygen to my legs.
okay,
So they would crap out, and I would have to just stop wherever I was because I literally could not move.
right? Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do?
You have to wait my heart rate come down. I'd rest, and then I could go for a little while. And some days I could go. Some days not.
Mm-hmm.
But what was starting to happen was the more I felt better and the more I was riding, I'd ride more and more and more. And then I'd branch out and do some big rides with people. And then I'd get back and I'd be toast for a couple of days.
Just
and I don't like that.
Take you 2 or 3 days to recover from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the guys down at the bike shop, once again, they said, Q, you should get on an e-bike. I said, no. I said, I'm gonna lose this weight. And that's a whole different conversation for a different podcast volume. But I'm just gonna do it. I was up riding on my Lefty in Green Pond with my buddy, and he's way up ahead of there, right?
Sure.
And this guy comes behind me, goes, "Hey, can I pass when you have a minute?" And because in Green Pond there's some sketchy spots that you just can't pass.
Right.
And I said, "Sure." So I pulled over a little bit, and he went past me, and he goes, "Thanks for letting me pass." I said, "Well, that's okay. I'm slow." And he goes, "Well, that's okay. I'm on an e-bike." And then he's taking off. I said, "Hey, let me ride it."
Hold on.
And he stopped and said, "Okay." And then I got on it and I rode, and it's like, whoa, I could go uphill and my heart rate's staying okay. And then I passed my buddy that was like way up there. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I got a new bike on the trail." But this guy riding it was actually stayed right behind me on my bike. I said, "What the heck?" And we ended up going riding some that same guy. I became friends with him. So we went on a couple other rides. So we'd switch off on big climbs. I'd ride up my e-bike or his e-bike. I'd ride my lefty, and then he'll come back. Yeah, and I said,
Sweet.
so I finally started demoing them, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a game changer.
Oh, yep,
So
exactly.
I love Del Brea Rise. Before Memorial Day, I bought my wife a new giant Rain
Mm-hmm.
E3.
Yeah, have
which
you
is
let her ride it yet?
Yeah, once, but that's a whole different story.
But it's still her bike, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we got it all tuned up, and then yesterday I took it up Green Pond Sardine down Wheelers, 18 miles, 2,500 feet elevation, and when I got done, I was still standing. It's like sweet. That's kind of my journey into e-biking. It's kind of hilarious to me that people bitch about e-bikes and that how it's cheating and their motorcycles. They don't know my story, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
Even with
if there
even
were,
with guys on.
how would
Go
you be
ahead.
riding now if it wasn't for e-bikes? What would your riding week look like?
It would definitely not include a mountain bike.
Okay, so you wouldn't be on a mountain bike at all if there were no
No,
e-bikes.
no, or
Okay.
maybe every once in a while.
Followed by a 2 or 3 day recovery, like you had
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
Okay,
So
what's it look like now with the e-bike?
well, I have two e-bikes myself. I can now ride almost every day
Okay,
if I choose to. Some days I say, well, I'm gonna take a recovery day just because I know I'm getting to my limit, and if I start pushing it, then I'll have little issues that I just don't care to have.
sure. So
You know,
the e-bike is keeping you super active, and I would imagine in much better health than if you didn't have them.
yeah, I still have a few other challenges that we don't need to go into right now, but for the most part, I'm feeling better than I had in my life.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm just more, and getting on the bike is therapy. Heart issues aside, the fitness aside, to me, it's become therapeutic.
Do you,
Um, the last year of actually over a year now, we had my in-laws living with me. My father-in-law had dementia. Mother-in-law was recovering from a severe fall where she broke her left arm and her right leg. So the last year was a challenge, to say the least.
it's been mental therapy in addition
Yeah,
to helping your physical health.
yeah. So sometimes my wife says, "Hey, you need to go for a bike ride."
I
Uh,
promise you,
that
your
I'm,
wife isn't the only wife that says that to their husbands.
yeah, especially therapeutic on my hybrid, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain biking's um, therapeutic as well, but as you got techie stuff. You got to go uphill. You got to pay attention a little bit more to what you're doing
Yeah, it's more
on a
brain
mountain
power.
bike opposed to sometimes I go down the Legacy Trail down to Salt Lake and back, or run around the Farmington Bird Refuge and back, and I might go 20, 30, 40 miles on that bike, and I might not even have 800 feet of elevation gain.
What do you say to people who claim that you're cheating when you're on your mountain bike?
Okay,
And remember, it's a family friendly.
so it all depends on who it is and what kind of mood I'm in. Because sometimes I just go off. It's like, where in my rule book does it say I can't ride an e-bike? And I said, you don't know my story. I rarely ever try to go faster than anybody else, even on my e-bike. I do it so that I don't go out and just pedal, pedal, pedal. Even on an e-bike,
Mhm.
I can still tax my heart to where I can have trouble.
You're still monitoring your
Yeah,
heart rate through it, regardless of
correct.
which bike you're on.
Yeah, and so you did a podcast here a few weeks ago with remind me his name, there in South Ogden, that doctor on Zone 2
Oh yeah,
training.
Dr. Cameron Garber.
I listened to that's one of the podcasts I listened to,
Mm-hmm.
and I picked up a few new things on there. But overall, that's how I ride. I can just go and keep it in Zone 2, even at the top of Zone 2, barely Zone 3. I can finish my ride and continue my day.
Okay. Not feel exhausted and
Correct.
ride the next day if you want to.
Correct.
Yeah, can't do that without the mountain bike. Or without the e-bike.
Yeah.
So it's definitely getting you out there more.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple guys that I ride with that even in boost mode on my rise, not my wife's full power because nothing holds, but I got guys I ride with that I when they go, I can't even keep up in boost mode because I don't my cardiovascular system is not wired for that full force.
Sure.
But I've learned to just calm it down, and I don't need to be king of the mountain. I don't need to be first. My goal is to finish and be able to go on my day. And secondly, my goal is to finish without a crash. Because Joe, I'm 60 years old and I do not bounce like I used to.
I don't think anybody is. Yeah.
Simple as that,
Oh,
right?
I hear you.
So
Okay. What advice, Q, would you give to people who are struggling with their own physical health issues?
let me ask you like this, if that's okay.
Mhm.
My father dropped dead of a heart attack at 65. My grandfather dropped dead of a heart attack in his 60s. My uncle dropped dead of a heart attack at 71. Like I talked about, it's genetics. So when I went through all my heart surgeries, especially my quadruple bypass, I was of the opinion that I can't beat my genetics.
Mm-hmm.
I said I'm going to die by the time I'm in my 60s. If not before. I got into this mental state. I had so much loss in 2008. It broke my heart for a couple of 2-3 years before I finally got out.
Oh,
I was reading a book, Mark Sessions, called The Primal Diet, and I still remember I could still see the verbiage on the page right where it was on the page, and he says you can rewrite your genetics.
Okay. So when we started this call, you said that your one of your first doctors, when you're at the beginning of your whole going through the surgery, said that what percentage of your issues were because of genetics?
70%.
Okay, you can rewrite that.
Correct. And
good for you.
And the more I studied about heart health and stuff, the more and this is going to be controversial, but I don't really give a damn, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that has heart problems or even what they call elevated cholesterol levels are put on a statin. The statins are the most evil thing in the world, right? I'm not going to go into all the science behind it, and even on some other medication that they had me on. When I was on those statins, I felt even worse before the heart surgery, to tell you the truth. And as I studied natural health, I came to the conclusion that it was no longer for me, right?
Okay.
I will not do pharmaceuticals.
Okay. So were you on the statins and then chose to get off?
Correct.
Okay.
Because I became educated on my own. Plus, I had some really key people that kind of turned me onto the natural health alternative health methods, right?
Okay.
I do all sorts of natural stuff, and like I said, I'm on no pharmaceuticals. So back to that's kind of a divergence of your question. What would I do? I would try to figure out what the underlying cause of the problem is. Pharmaceuticals, and I'll be controversial here. I don't care. Pharmaceuticals mask the issue, not heal the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When I got off all that stuff, my blood pressure is perfect. I'm working on some things to get rid of my weight. So really, pay attention to hydration. Pay attention to your diet. Actually let me rephrase that: nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Just figure out what the underlying cause is. I've read so many books and talked to so many nutritionists, and sometimes that doesn't sound right for me, so I ignore it. That sounds great. And then, I'm fortunate to have a well-connected network. And so typically I have people that in particular thing know more than me, so I can bounce things off. But I guess the number one thing is, just don't give up. I think so many in my age range, and even older, they just have setbacks with health, and then they just accept it as life, and then they just sit on the couch and wither away.
Right. So basically take
You know?
charge. And really, when you and I first started talking about having you on the show, I knew that my biggest takeaway was going to be is that you took charge and you didn't just sit back and say, well, it's genetics. It's just me. There's nothing I can do. You said, well, I can get control over this and I can have a positive outcome for extending my life and my health span.
Exactly. You know, I had a conversation with my wife the other day about this whole thing. I've had to eliminate that negative self-talk. And like I said, I listen to my body, I listen to my heart. And if it tells me not to write today, I listen, you know.
Yep, that's
and
great advice.
there's so many natural health things for about everything. Like I have a sauna at my house and I have a cold plunge. So most days I get up and start with the sauna, go in the cold plunge every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's been great for my inflammation.
Okay.
And that's another thing too, right? It's like I'm 60 years old, and just in the last 2-3 years, I finally come to the conclusion that it took me a while to get here. It's going to take me a long while to get where I want to be. Instead of getting all upset, I no longer weigh every day. I used to weigh every day. Like, oh, frick, I'm up 2 pounds today. I'm down 2 pounds tomorrow. And I'll go all nutso, right?
Sure.
So it's like, it's just one day at a time. I do the best that I know to do, and I search out answers.
Win the day.
You know, that's my motto.
Yeah.
We could do a whole podcast on where that came from. But, win the day, and then, you know, Winston Churchill said it best, you know, victory at all costs. We shall never surrender. So win the day, never surrender, and just keep on going. Right? We don't have to go at our age. We do not have to go 100 miles an hour every day.
Right.
And it's like the Dr. Garber said, it's actually detrimental. You know, it's like, so I ride as much as I can, sometimes to the detriment of my actual responsibilities. But hey, as long as I get a bike ride in on the days I want to, life's all good. I always say this. People tell me to stay out of trouble, and I say, well, I can't stay out of trouble. And they go, why not? I said, because my doctor says I can't have no stress. And staying out of trouble is too stressful. So on my e-bike I go, and there we are.
Here we are. And we'll see you in your bright-colored kit out on the trail.
Yeah. It's important that we just know about nutrition, exercise. And like I was saying, if anybody's out there, just reach out. My number is 801-309-1903. And I have so many contacts, or I can maybe even give you advice as well. But just ride on.
Right on.
Ride on.
Right
on. My greatest reward for this journey of health and coming to where I'm at today is when my grandkids, who are now 9 and 7, well, my oldest ones, I have an 8-month-old and a 1-month-old now, but my 9 and my 7-year-old, when they call me up and say, Papa, let's go riding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, well, you want to go on the pavement or you want to go on the dirt? Let's hit the dirt, Papa.
That's awesome.
And then my little 7-year-old grandson, Papa, let's send it. Let's do a full send. I was like, dude, let's go.
I wonder who taught him that.
Well, you know what? I can't claim to know that I taught him that. I don't know where it came from, but the kid is he's just awesome.
That's so fun. Cool. So, well, keep doing what you're doing and keep it getting better, and you'll have more and more rides with your grands just like that. Thanks for being on the show, Q.
Well, that's another lap around the bike park for Aging on Dirt. I hope you've learned something and or found this entertaining. Most importantly, go out and apply what you've learned so you can experience more joy on your bike. Remember, Joel wants your input. What topics and or guests do you want to hear? Reach out to him where you're listening to the podcast, on Facebook, or find his email/phone on his coaching website, jzmtb.com. Until next time, have fun and be safe out there.